All right, logicians. So in this video, we're going to talk about chapter 1 of Baronett, section C and D. Now, section C is about the difference between arguments and explanations. Uh, these are two different things, which are easy to get confused with one another. And they both involve, or they can involve, the key word because. Now, because, as we've seen, is a keyword that often precedes the premise of an argument. However, it doesn't always precede the premise of an argument. It's not always denoting an argument at all. Sometimes the word because precedes a statement that is supposed to explain some other fact rather than proving that it is the case. Here's the difference between an argument and an explanation. An argument is trying to give reasons to prove some conclusion that is not taken for granted. An explanation, on the other hand, isn't trying to prove that something is the case. It's trying to show what caused that fact to occur. Now, let me give you a rule of thumb for telling the difference. Let's say you come across any sentence with the form X because Y. And sometimes the word order can be different. It can be because Y, X. That logically they're equivalent. It's just like you switch the order of the because statement and the other statement. If you come across one of those sentences, ask yourself these questions. Is the X statement taken for granted already as an accepted fact? If the answer is yes, it is taken for granted as an accepted fact, then Y, the other statement, the because statement, Y is supposed to provide an explanation for X. It's not trying to prove it. So in that case, you've got an explanation. But if X is something that the speaker is trying to convince us of that's not being taken for granted, then X is a conclusion of an argument, and Y is a premise in that argument. That sounds kind of abstract, but this is going to make more sense with examples, and then you can go back to my rule and it'll help you more, okay? So, in an explanation, the word because is used to provide reasons for how an event occurred, and it's already an accepted fact that the event did occur. Now, look at this first example. Because you started lifting weights without first getting a physical checkup, you will probably injure your back. All right, let's use my rule, all right? In this case, the form of this sentence is because X, Y. I'm sorry, going back to my formula, it's because Y, X, okay? Where the statement that immediately follows because is Y, and you will probably injure your back is X. Now ask the question about X. Is it taken for granted that X is true, that you're going to injure your back? Or is it something not taken for granted that the speaker's trying to prove? Well, in this case, it's not taken for granted that you're going to injure your back. The speaker is trying to warn us and convince us that that's probably what's going to happen. In this case, it's not an explanation, it's an argument. The because statement is a premise. You started lifting weights without first getting a physical checkup. That provides reasons to believe that another thing is going to happen. You're going to injure your back. Right? It's not an explanation, it's an argument. Now look at the second example. Your back injury occurred because you lifted weights without first getting a physical checkup. So here it's X because Y. Now ask a question about the X statement. Your back injury occurred because da da da. Is it taken for granted that the back injury occurred? Yes, it is. That's not really in question. Is the speaker trying to prove to us that the back injury occurred? No, it's not. The speaker's not. The speaker is trying to show us what caused the back injury to happen. That's an explanation. In this case, the word because is denoting explanation, not argument. let's look at another example here. So in the explanation case, it's already an accepted fact that your back injury happened. And now we're just trying to connect the dots between what made it happen, what caused it. In the argument scenario, we've got a premise which is trying to provide proof for that latter claim. Here's what's probably going to happen. Okay, so there's the difference. Now, remember my rule of thumb. You see a statement X because Y or because Y X, ask yourself, is the X taken for granted as an accepted fact, or is it something the speaker is trying to convince us of? If it's taken for granted, then the because statement is giving us an explanation. If it's not taken for granted, if they're trying to prove it to us, then the because statement is a premise in an argument. All right, that's arguments versus explanations. Let's talk for a second about section D. Oh, and let's look at one more example, right? Example, I couldn't do my homework yesterday because I had to work a double shift yesterday. Now, here we've got X because Y. So the X statement is, I couldn't do my homework. Now, is the speaker trying to prove to us that they couldn't do their homework? Or is the speaker trying to explain why it was the case, what caused it to be the case that they couldn't do their homework? Ponder that for a second. I understand why you might be tempted to say, well, they're trying to prove it to their teacher, so it's not their fault and therefore they should get an extension. I understand why you would say that. But actually, that's not the case. They're not really trying to prove to you that it was impossible for them to do it. They're trying to explain why it was that the homework didn't happen. Here's what caused it to be the case that I could not do my homework. You know, it's already clear I didn't, and in fact, couldn't do my homework. But here's what caused that to be the case. In this case, it's an explanation. Okay, I'm going to pause there. I'll do section D in another video.